This is a story that was told to me that was allegedly first told at Hildene, the historic home of Robert Todd Lincoln. It was more of a statement, really, a fun fact that could be passed from person to person. It said simply that Robert Todd Lincoln was the only known person to have met all four assassinated U.S. presidents. Now, when you hear something like this, your first question is probably, how on earth is this possible? That was certainly my question. The four presidential assassinations span nearly a century. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in 1865. James A. Garfield was assassinated in 1881 by Charles Guiteau. And then William McKinley was killed in 1901 by Leon Czolgosz. So far, so good in terms of the claim. Obviously, all is not well for our three presidents. The problem with this story is the outlier. JFK was killed in 1963 by Lee Harvey Oswald. The first three assassinations occurred within a 36-year window. There are probably a few career politicians who met all three presidents. Adding JFK, though, expands this window by 62 years. Or so it seems. First, let's verify how Robert met the first three presidents, which is actually pretty easy to do. Robert Todd Lincoln was born on August 1st, 1843 to, you guessed it, Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln. So that's one president down already. A little bit more about Robert Lincoln. He took the Harvard College entrance exam in 1859, but failed all but one of the 16 subjects on the test. After trying again, he got into the college in 1860 and graduated as part of the class of 1864. He then enrolled in Harvard Law School, but left in January of 1865 to join the Union Army and temporarily serve with General Grant's immediate staff. Contrary to popular belief, he was not at Ford's Theater when his father was shot, but was instead at the White House. Upon hearing the news, he rushed to the Peterson House, which was across the street from Ford's Theater, and was where President Lincoln was moved. Following the assassination, Lincoln, the alive one that is, moved with his family to Chicago. He took classes at the University of Chicago Law School and was admitted to the bar in 1867. A few years later, in 1871, his brother Tad died. This left Robert as the only surviving Lincoln child. Years later, in 1985, when his grandson Robert Beckwith died, the direct Lincoln line also died out. Tad's death ultimately caused Robert to institutionalize his mother, which we frankly don't have time to cover. It's a convoluted and pretty strange topic. In 1877, Robert was offered the position of Assistant Secretary of State by President Rutherford B. Hayes. He turned it down, which was a pretty common thing for him to do. Throughout his life, he was offered many governmental positions and was even considered as a potential Republican Party presidential nominee, but he almost always refused to participate. He did finally accept James A. Garfield's offer to be Secretary of War, though. 2 down. More interestingly, he was actually present when Garfield was shot. Lincoln had arranged to meet Garfield at the 6th Street train station in Washington, D.C. He was about 40 feet from Garfield when Guiteau opened fire and shot him twice. Lincoln and Kennedy's assassinations were close to instantaneous. Once they were shot, it was a foregone conclusion. Not so with the two lesser-known assassinations. Garfield was shot on July 2, 1881. He didn't die until September 19th. For months, doctors looked for the second bullet that had lodged somewhere in his back. The first one only grazed his shoulder. They basically just probed the wound with unwashed fingers and then were surprised that Garfield developed an infection. At one point, Alexander Graham Bell tried to use a metal detector to find the bullet, but the doctors interfered with the procedure and Bell found nothing. When the president died, Lincoln continued to serve as Secretary of War under Chester A. Arthur until his term ended in 1885. Let's fast forward a little. By 1901, Lincoln had served as Foreign Minister to the UK under Benjamin Harrison, yet another president he met who wasn't assassinated. He had also become president of the Pullman Palace Car Company in 1897. In 1901, then President William McKinley invited him to the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. 3 down. Why was he invited? Well, he really wasn't. I'll have him explain. Quote, "No one wanted me for Secretary of War, for Minister of England, for President of the Pullman Company. They wanted Abraham Lincoln's son." That summarizes a lot of Robert's life. Anyway, guess what happened in Buffalo? Leon Czolgosz, an off-balance anarchist, shot McKinley twice, with one bullet grazing him and another entering his abdomen. Robert wasn't actually at the assassination, he got word of it as his train pulled in. He then went immediately to McKinley's bedside and was convinced that he would be fine. McKinley died the next week of an infection. We now arrive at the part of the story where things seem to become wildly implausible. But there's more I haven't told you yet. The story has a contingency, you see. JFK was born in 1917. Robert Lincoln died in 1926. The story that I was told contends that JFK met Lincoln just after he turned 5 at the rededication of the Lincoln Memorial. So, did they meet there? I don't know. It is well documented that Robert Lincoln was there. I just haven't been able to find evidence that the Kennedys were there. JFK's father, Joseph Kennedy, was a relatively important man, and I would think his appearance at the event would have been noted. The National Park Service has a website listing important attendees, and the Kennedys are simply never mentioned. But wait, you must be thinking. Didn't you say this story was told at Hildene, Robert Lincoln's residence? Maybe? You see, I have spoken to several people who insist they heard this story told at Hildene years ago. But when I contacted Hildene, they claimed to have no evidence or logic to the story. What makes this so annoying is that the story makes so much sense. The Kennedys would be the exact type of people to be present at the dedication. Joseph Kennedy was a bit obsessed with getting his sons into positions of power. I can entirely see him introducing a young JFK to Robert Todd Lincoln following the dedication and saying something along the lines of, "He's President Lincoln's son. You could be president too someday." But no, there's no evidence of this anywhere. So I started combing through footage of the event. Okay, look for a child. They probably would have sat up front. They're wealthy. Up front would make sense. Okay, there's kids. I guess they don't look like young JFK, so that doesn't really work. The footage is great, though. So after all of this, I still can't confirm that Kennedy was there. If anyone can find a source placing him there, please let me know. I don't think there will be any sources placing him there, though. Sometimes good stories are just stories. Even if this was false, it was fun to hear, and I uncovered a lot I didn't know in trying to prove something I really wanted to be true. So, next time someone tells you a fun fact, jump down the rabbit hole. Even if you don't prove it right, you might learn something in researching it that is even more fun.